Sauls. I'm a content manager at InterWorks, and I do a lot of things just getting smart people to talk about data and analytics. We actually talked about this, Michael and Annabelle, that for a long time I said, I'm not a data person. And Michael, you pressed me to be like, well, why would you say that you're not a data person? Right. So I'm slowly getting more comfortable with saying that, but that's me. I'll pitch it over to Annabelle, who, respectively so, has much more experience in data enablement to tell a little bit about herself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and to run this webinar series with Garrett. I have like 20 years experience. I have been working in different roles, from data analyst to leading a team of Tableau developer, or even like on my last role, leading the Center of Enablement for Swiss Bank. And that's why I'm really convinced that enablement is very crucial for any organization. And it's often like the missing piece. That's what makes like a digital transformation or data analytics platform implementation successful. At least that's what I think. That's why we come up with this webinar series. And every month we receive like an interesting guest. And it's a great honor for me to receive Michael Plouviez. I hope that I pronounce it well. I pronounce it to French people. Oui. So let's see. He will correct me. Like
Très bien, très bien.
Ah, cool. So Michael is a vice president in quantitative analytics at JPMorgan Chase, and he lives in the Chicago area with his wife and 2 kids. Michael wanted to be a music therapist, but he ultimately pivoted to consumer behavior with emphasis on behavioral economics and organization psychology. Very interesting, and like you can imagine, we have a lot of questions already, like just with that. So Michael is also a certified Tableau desktop specialist and a frequent community contributor. And we had the chance to have a nice coffee with Michael at Tableau conference. So thank you very much, Michael, for joining. I will let you like develop a little bit the introduction, and maybe to get you started, you can talk about your daily activity or why you think that enablement is important.
Of course, yes. Thank you very much. And I agree. It was fantastic getting to meet both of you at Tableau conference. One of the things that I got to say at the very onset is, disclaimer, all views and opinions expressed here are my own. And if I mention any specific tool or technology, it's not an endorsement, but just purely through my own experience and personal interests. So that's out of the way.
Great disclaimer.
Yes, great. Like this is career journey. And absolutely, as you had mentioned, like summarizing a very strange adventure, as you'd mentioned, wanting to be a musician and a music therapist, and then following my own enablement journey in understanding, what is it that I'm looking for? What is it that interests me? But also what is needed or that I perceived as needed in my world. And so because of that, went from music to psychology to consumer behavior. And you'll notice that I mentioned all of those things, which definitely makes me one of those imposters, right? I am a quant analytics guy. I'm in big data all the time, but I'm an imposter. I don't have a computer science background, but that's okay. Because enablement really is understanding, like people understand data. People want to be able to do fun things. And so enablement to me is really just simplifying things as much as possible so that whatever you're trying to convey or communicate or build or whatever has the greatest maximal appeal. And like people feel inspired or motivated to build cool things and to maintain clean data and to just have fun, really. I'm still a musician. I play with Legos all the time. Got 2 kids. They're very much into art and music and singing at the top of their lungs, and just go from there.
That's awesome. I'll start with the music bit. So what initially drew you to music? I mean, where did that love of uh music started? I know we talked a little bit in our primer conversation about piano, and you have an encyclopedic knowledge of piano players, but what drew you to that? What did it for you?
I honestly have no idea. So in the way, way back machine, my great grandmother, shortly after immigrating to the Chicago area, she wanted music in her life. So even in their cramped multi-story, multi-family flat in Chicago, she had a piano on every level of the house. And so she would play all of the time. And I never met my great grandmother, but I had nearly all of her music books. To this day, they have all disintegrated, but luckily I was able to digitize them beforehand. But when I was 4 and my mother wanted to make sure that we all had a musical background, she took us all to get piano lessons, and my piano teacher was like, I don't usually take kids that are that young. But she saw that I was um, observant and attentive and not a typical 4-year-old just hammering on the keys. And so she consented to teach me. And so I had lessons for a year, and then we moved away. And there's something about music, something about how it makes me feel. And then being completely separated from any formal training, I feel like I was allowed to grow into music because music was something that I did myself and invented myself. So lessons for 1 year, and then the rest is just self-taught. It's how it makes me feel.
That's great, which is a very interesting contrast to what you studied in university, which would be consumer behavior. Can you tell us about that jump?
Yeah, so as most people do as they are going through life, I started at community college because I needed to fund my way through college, as a lot of people need to. And at that time, I was still thinking about being a music therapist, but then I internally, recognizing in myself, discovered I'm a little bit too empathetic, probably, to be an effective therapist, just carrying on too many other people's um, life stories. And so then I was like, all right, I want to be a professor. And so I pivoted to wanting to be just a college professor. And so that was a lot of fun. And then when I was in my senior year, I had a personal finance course and great experience with the professor there. But he had a math and engineering background. And he's like, you know what? I want to build out a behavioral psychology component, but I don't know anything about psychology. You do. And around this time, this was probably 2010, 20, no, 2012, 2013. So put it in context of the macroeconomic trends at the time, I recognized that I needed to go into grad school. This was a great opportunity. And so I pivoted to that. And then as I got into grad school, I was like, well, music psychology research, a bit niche, but consumer behavior, that's cool. And so that was my pivot. And then lastly, pivoting from consumer behavior and becoming a professor, I realized, maybe I don't want to be a professor. Maybe I want to take my skills, whatever they are, and then apply it into something that's more forward thinking on my journey.
That's really cool.
I don't
Annabelle.
think that you will completely abandon like music, even the way you speak. I think, like the tone and everything. I wish I had like this capability to to sometimes limitate the speed of my voice.
Yes. No, music is still very much a part of my life. Listening to, enjoying it in my music library on my computer. I've got probably close to 30 or 40,000 songs, and I've listened to almost all of them because for a time I was like, all right, I want to listen to everything and not just listen to it, but also rate it. So in your music library, you can rate things. And so just surrounded by music all of the time. And when I was in college, one of the other things, in part of the enablement conversations that we're going to be getting into, is that in college, I loved to compose music for my friends. And so we put together little tiny, um, just group of people getting together to play music. But then I wrote my friends' parts. I can only play piano, but I've listened to so much music that one of my friends played the cello, so I wrote it for cello. One of my friends played trumpet, so I transposed things into trumpet clef, and then a flute and a viola. Like, how many times does a person get to do that for their friends?
Mhm. Yeah, that's always funny. I think it goes back to that the way it makes something makes you feel and the way you can make others feel by giving them something with your abilities. I'm curious what, obviously, music, consumer behavior, quantitative analytics on the surface, although those things seem very, I don't want to say disparate, but very different disciplines. But what's the through line for you? As Annabelle pointed out, obviously, there's still some music and cadence in your voice in your presentation, but in your day to day, what you do today, what's been that through line for you from that love of music, consumer behavior, quant, all that?
Yeah. So, music and psychology to me are really connected. They're part of the same thing, really. Everybody knows about the connections between music and math. No big surprise there. But music and psychology are inextricably linked because music can affect how we feel. We can express ourselves through music. And because of that, this liltiness or this understanding of patterns and voices and tone and tenor, you think about it in terms of organizational psychology. Well, the way that you present yourself, the tone that you take, your pacing, your thoughtfulness, or anything else like that. Annabelle, it was a fantastic observation. It's that we as humans express ourselves through patterns. And so psychology really, at the end of the day, is an investigation of the patterns of people, the way that they think, the way that they approach problems. And music is really no different. If you understand psychology and you understand music, then you're able to tap into this harmony of life. So when I was growing up, I was very much enamored with lots of different pianists, especially. So I had, like most kids, probably, a kick of Beethoven. And so we would get lots of CDs of Beethoven sonatas, but then they were the same sonatas. One person wrote all of these things, but Glenn Gould and Van Cliburn and Nodar Gabunya all play the same song, Moonlight Sonata, Opus 27, number 2, but with different feelings, different paces. And so that was beautiful and revolutionary towards me because I was following along in the sonata book myself. And so, like, I can read the notes, but then you can hear, you can feel how they are changing things, changing the patterns. And it can change how you feel.
And you also, I suppose that you are a great listener because you're a great listener in music. So you are probably a great listener also to other people. And that's probably helped you. I don't know if you had to do it, but at least that helped me for really understand the business problem of a stakeholder and, for instance, in my case, building a great dashboard. But so it's, I think that listening and this psychology probably help you. Sometimes for me it's intuitive. For you, I think it's more a concept. You probably conceptualize it.
Yeah. So, like, to that end, I don't know how many times you've sat in like an undergrad or high school concert and you're hearing all the people, or even when you get to a symphony or orchestra early, and you hear all of these instruments, all of these professionals, all of these different people experimenting on the parts that are difficult to them, or the different riffs, or the different motifs and different motives. And it's all this cacophony of sound. Well, to your point, that idea of a cacophony of sound is the same as our stakeholders in various settings. So when you are an enablement lead or you're in any kind of position where you have the opportunity to build something, you have a symphony of voices around you, and you're able to pick things out here and there. And so, our goal as enablement conductors, enablement orchestrators, is then to take all of those sounds and start getting it into a single thing. The stuff, the comments, the voices, and the objectives all need to come together into something that is beautiful for everybody.
On this end, you had mentioned the different versions of Moonlight Sonata, different takes essentially on the same song. And on our prep call, I remember you saying something like, all data are the same. The only differences are the characteristic and expression. So this is a great through line. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, as it applies to data, how would you characterize that? How would you explain that?
Yeah, so like foundational statement, thesis level statement, all data are the same. And you think about that a little bit. But that's because data have three components. You need to have a category, so like how you bucket something. Then you need to ascribe a weight, so like how significant is this thing? But then not only how significant is this thing, but also the temporal aspect. How significant is this thing in time? And so when you start thinking about data in that respect, it doesn't matter what tool you're using. It doesn't matter what technology, what system, what programming language. All data they need to contain those three things. And once you understand those relationships, then like you can build a thing and then swap out all of the data as long as the new schema that you're introducing has the same kind of stuff. One of my favorite books that I read uh, is by an author. His name is George Lakoff, and the name of the book is Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things. What categories reveal about the human mind? And so Annabelle, to your point, like I love listening to languages, I love investigating languages, and Lakoff is a linguist. And the book is fantastic because in different languages, one word can describe all three of those things.
Oh, yeah.
And so because of that, because there are billions of people in the world, there are hundreds, if not thousands of languages and dialects. And so the way that we express our words, the way that we categorize things is really important, really impactful. One of the things that I love about language and learning about language and the history of language is that there is one word that is nearly universally constant across nearly all of humanity. One word, lox, smoked salmon.
I had that for breakfast. What are the
Yeah,
odds?
right. And so, like, which lets us know that somewhere when the human tribes were all closer together, one of the most important things that they had to eat was smoked salmon. And so, as they dispersed all across the world over the course of thousands of years, there are some languages that are consistent across all the, Proto-Indo-European languages, but that is one of them. And I find that fascinating. And deep down, we all like fish. Maybe that's not what it means.
Somewhere in there. I mean, I agree with that statement. I see nothing wrong with that statement. Locks is still a very important part of my life today.
Mhm. Indeed.
I'm curious though, obviously we have these origins, we have these foundational elements. What happens, I think a big difference is when people get far away from those. They get far away from those foundational things. So how do you bring people back to speaking that same language if you do have change or you do have friction or you do have a movement from one thing to another and you have people essentially speaking a different language? How do you get them reunified and focused on the same thing, back to those fundamental efforts, so that hopefully they can use the new thing better or embrace change more readily or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that is a tough and loaded question.
Yes.
But when we are thinking about navigating through these change environments, these change situations, ultimately, you need to understand each person as far as possible on their own level. So when I was in my grad school training, learning about this mindset theory of like a fixed mindset where like being really good at understanding one thing or this change mindset, not necessarily like or growth mindset, but this idea or concept that you're able to do anything regardless the feedback. If I fail, that's all right, fail fast, and it helps
Mhm.
me to learn. But then as you're helping people navigate through change environments from the psychology aspect, understand that deep down, everybody can be a little scared of change. And so you need to recognize that it's not necessarily that you're going to, climb under this desk and hide in the dark. It's not that level of scared, but this level of uncertainty. And so if you come to each person, and that's the first thing that you recognize, we are in a change environment. So first, be empathetic and say, we're changing. All right. All of these things are changing. All of them are happening at the same time. But what is your foundation? And so you get people talking about their foundations, and across any change environment, the foundations are still going to be the same. Like we're still going to have data. That doesn't matter if data's on-prem or data's up in the cloud or anywhere in between. Get people comfortable with their foundations and then build from there. See where they want to go and help them get there.
Yeah,
That's how you take this cacophony of sound.
I always tend to say that the first reaction is often rejection when toward change. Um, and yes, maybe you have like additional tip to give us how to approach when, I don't know, I come with like a new dashboard that should save like a lot of time to them, and they say, no, I don't want it. And they push it away. I mean, I have my own trick, but maybe you have some good ideas about that.
Yeah. So to me, this is one of the pitfalls of those of us with dashboard design of sometimes, no offense, Annabelle, but sometimes we get stuck in our own little rut and then we build things in silos. And so this great idea to me, this great idea to you, if we forget to continue to have those conversations, then whatever we build, not going to have very good adoption.
Mhm.
And so, like, that's that level of rejection. And so, you build a thing. If you don't bring people along with it, then you're going to have a hard time. That's why you need to have constant stakeholder engagement, constant stakeholder support, because then once we unveil this new thing, if your key stakeholders can identify something that they had put in as input. Let's just imagine that you've got all this thing on the screen. And so, like, you've got six different stakeholders, and all six of them can see what they told you. They may not agree with all the rest of the five, but if they agree with you on one thing, you're helping to get that buy-in so they become your evangelists, so to speak,
Mhm.
to say, this is a good step. Sure, it's a change. Not really the way I used to do it in the past. But then to your point, Annabelle, of helping to get people more time, bring them more time, that's really the secret motivation of nearly every human on this planet. A universal need, ignore Maslow and anybody else. If you think about it, what nearly every person wants deep down is more time. More time doing the things they love, being with the people that they love and care about, and less time the stuff that they don't like. It all boils down to time. So you spend time coaching them, scaffolding them, bringing them along, then you're going to have less rejection. And then the last thing about rejection is that mindsets, not only can you understand mindsets of people outside of yourself, but if you understand your own mindsets, you can learn to temporarily change the way that you think about yourself or your products or the things that you build. And so when I'm working with stakeholders, I let them know that I am open to all feedback. You can tell me that something is garbage. You can tell it to my face. I am not going to take it personally, but I'm going to ask you how to make it better. Rejection is okay. It's the building afterwards.
Exactly. I see that we have the same trick, like make them recognize the little touch. And it's cool.
I like that though. You give people a lot of times dealing with friction, the best way to deal with those misgivings or that friction or that uncertainty or that fear or whatever is giving people a stake. Like Michael, as you had said, a lot of people want time, but I think a lot of people also want to feel that they have agency as well and being able to do those things. And I think that's a really clever tactic to be, and I say tactic, but really it is a well-intentioned thing to say, you have a stake in this, you have a role in this, you have agency in this. And in addition to time, people just want to know that are we on the same team? Do I matter here? Can I contribute here? Am I valued here? And by doing that, yeah, it just gets people involved. And then you shift that mindset as well. You shift that mindset from being like, I'm going to continue to focus on the problem to, okay, I'm going to focus on the solution. And all of a sudden the person I'm talking to is becoming solution oriented as well, which is a really important shift. So kudos to both of you. And that's not to say that it's still not a challenging thing to do, because sometimes that fear can overshadow those things. It's not always a linear journey for people, right? Even after you have a great one-on-one conversation or you meet them at their level.
Mhm. And not only that, but it can take time as well. So, like, we are here in this conversation, we're talking about all of these great things, and at the top of the hour, this conversation is going to be finished. But that doesn't mean like these projects that we're talking about, these work streams, these changes, they all take varying degrees of time. And it's okay. Just take a deep breath, just keep moving forward.
Mhm. So soothing, so reassuring.
Right. I am your data therapist. I am your data psychologist. It's all going to be okay. I hear you.
I really do love it. I'm curious, Michael. This is an interesting question as well, and I think this is a good one that is potentially for both of you. But as enablement professionals, so often you all are focused on filling others' cups, right? On giving them resources and connecting them to things. Where do each of you turn when you are looking for resources or inspiration, or even just a shift in mindset? It doesn't necessarily have to be I'm looking for inspiration on the next big thing. It could just be I'm looking to change my mindset on something. How do I do that? What are those resources you turn to when you're looking for help or assistance? She's thinking thoughtfully.
Myself, so I will speak like, so I will give like Michael some some additional second, more time.
Ah.
No, for me, it's like I love to learn. I love to learn new things. I'm a constant learner. So I absolutely, even if I know a lot about data visualization, best practice, how the brain works and everything, I'm constantly running book, attended webinar, and try to have a fresh mindset. So for instance, last year I attended like a webinar on visualization, more like on the data art. which is a little far away of what I do at work, for instance, And I listen of how this amazing designer approach a problem, and where they are doing a mood wall, and gaining inspiration on different ecosystem website that I would have never thought about. So for me, it will be like learn and try to have a fresh eye and learn new thing, attend new thing and new trainings.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, if you haven't picked it up yet, I'll just go ahead and say it now. It's that I am always on the move, always trying new things. And so for me to refill my cup or to get a new perspective, it's to just keep reading. It's to keep learning, to keep listening. So you'd mentioned that we were all at the Tableau conference this year, and I didn't register for too many of like the big
Mm-hmm.
deep dive hands-on sessions. I wanted to have a buffet of listening to practically everything that I could. And so I went from thing to thing with an open mind. And it turns out that 9 out of the every 10 things that I listened to, it carried an answer that I was looking for. And so the other ways that I use to refill my cup is to have soft processing time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we just need to quite literally shut down our computer and then instead of sitting down and having lunch, to just walk.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability the abilities that you can unlock and the skills that you can uncover and the cups that you can refill, a lot of that can be solved with just going on a walk,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I think there's science to back it up. I'm not going to quote a study. People can likely find it out there, but my understanding and from what I have heard is when you do something like walking, it uses a different part of your brain. It unlocks the executive function of your brain. So you go from this deep task work to this more I don't want to say primal, but more instinctual. Like I'm going to focus on walking. I'm going to focus on putting one foot in front of the other. And what that does, kind of like a computer, it defrags some parts of your brain and allows you to think about things in a different way rather than sitting in front of your computer. And as you said, Michael, just kind of using the same pathways to approach a problem. And I think that's a thing we underrate a lot as people is we think so many of these problems are mental only, when in reality, your mental state is so connected to your physiological state, right? In terms of walking, in terms of doing something, in terms of improving our mood, in terms of improving the way we think about things. So I'm sure that I butchered that to some degree. Someone's going to be actually, it's like this function that you meant to reference, and that is okay. Like I said, I am okay with being wrong, but I do know the foundational principle here is there's a lot of power in those simple acts. Simply getting up from your desk and walking or enjoying nature. Someone had said walking through the forest is their reboot. I completely agree. I'm such a big nature buff, so I think that's very true on so many levels. This is an interesting question we got in the chat, if you don't mind. Someone had asked, how can empathy and understanding consumer behavior improve data analytics and spotting trends and predicting needs? Are there underused psychological insights that could make data strategies more effective?
That is a fantastic question. Yes, like consumer behavior, understanding how people interact with your thing of interest, your object of interest, is vitally important. So, like, let me think. I'm trying to think of an analogy here. It'll take me a moment.
That's
Like
okay.
long, long, thoughtful pauses. So when you understand consumer behavior and the motivations why a person is doing this thing or another, like in data and design. Okay, so I had to think a little bit for something in my way back machine to actually come forward and surface itself. So defrag. Um, so when I was doing master's research, one of the small projects that I had done was using an eye tracker to understand how people were natively reading things on a web page. And so this was in the era of using eye trackers to just watch where people's eyes are going on the screen. And this was about the age of the discovery of the Google Golden Triangle, where you do a Google search and then like you eyes consistently have a pattern of where they look at things. It's very consistent, really, all across the world, just based off of how the internet has developed. But then to this idea of consumer behavior of like if your audience or your stakeholders or whatever, if they are interacting with a web page, then if you understand the consumer behavior or the psychological behavior of how we scan information on a web page, then that can influence where to put a button or a feature or an advertisement or anything else like that. So one of the other uh, sidetracks to this particular exercise was, well, okay, then if we have this Google Golden Triangle and we know where people are putting their eyes, then what if you try and disrupt that somehow? What if you have an advertisement right in the middle of your
Mhm.
search results? But then you get this curious feature of people quickly looking around it and not
Mhm.
registering that it's there. And so you need to think about like, what are you putting? How are you putting it? What does it look like? How big is it? What color schemes, what shape, etc. But if you want to de-emphasize things, the stuff that you don't care about, you put in the bottom right corner of a thing. Odds are people aren't going to see it. So if you know about consumer behavior and intersecting with this data, if you have a web page or any other application that you are designing and you're freaking out about adoption, just take a step back and say, okay, consumer behavior says people are going to look in these areas. The thing that I want to drive adoption, is it over here? And then you do a correlation and you're like, oh, well, the more likely that I have this thing over here, the less likely people are going to do whatever it is. And so like that's where you start looking at behavior and then the outcomes that you're searching for.
Yeah, really smart, really well thought out, really well thought out answer. I appreciate the in-depth thing. This is interesting. You said something that got me to thinking. I think often this isn't just true of enablement spheres or data spheres. This is again consumer. This is communication for anything, and often the issue that most people experience is a lack of communication. They don't know a thing is happening. They don't know the dashboard was built. They don't know the data exists. They don't know they have access to the thing. They don't know all the things that they can do. But conversely, there are problems, and I have seen this as well, where there's too much communication. And the old adage is if everything is important, then nothing is important. And like you had mentioned that, you demand someone's attention with that, people are going to start looking along the periphery because if you abuse that to the end, they're just going to view that as noise. And so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on in terms of when you're talking about data things or you're communicating a change or just communicating anything in life and work. Um, how do you emphasize that signal over noise? How do you balance how much communication is enough communication, how much communication is too much? Are there any things that you just learned along the way? And I know you kind of touched on it a bit already, but are there any things you've learned along the way in terms of, you know what, I've found that this is probably the most effective way to communicate a change or something important that people to know? Are there any strategies or tactics that you might recommend?
Yes.
All right, that's all I needed to hear.
Yep, that's fine.
Move on.
Uh, So with some strategies and tactics, first of all, if you need to convey an idea to a person or a stakeholder from this learning mindset or learning theory that we had talked about before, you make the information that you're trying to convey as easy to get to as possible.
Mm-hmm.
In medicine, there's this idea of clicks save lives. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, if your nurses or doctors have to keep continuously clicking through a million different applications, that's taking a lot of doctor time.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a lot of potential impacts with quality of health outcomes. But the same is true for us data professionals as well, or even in education, really any sphere, where, all right, you have a message that you want to convey to me, right? Garrett, are
Mm-hmm.
you going to send me that just point blank in a couple of sentences at the top of an email? Or are you going to send me an email that contains a deck that contains 68 pages, and that the
Mm-hmm.
thing that you want me to know about is at the 67th page of a 68-page deck that I have to barrel all the way through?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The odds of me looking at that practically
Mm-hmm.
zero. So then, to facilitate communication, there always is too much communication, like too many emails, too many meetings, too many Zoom calls. But really, the best way to communicate is to just talk to the key stakeholders directly. It can be a skip level. It can be skip several levels, up the hierarchy or down the hierarchy or sideways. It doesn't matter. If you need to convey a question or you need to get an answer, take the humble, empathetic approach and say, hey, person, I need help. Or, hey, person, I've got this thing, because there's a limit to how much we can do. But if we listen to our stakeholders and we engage with them often, quite often they will get excited and communicate the message for you. At the end of the day, that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So really simplify the communication. I've been going on at length for like 4 minutes answering this question, but it's
No, it's
really,
it's a complex question.
yeah. So really, in every problem, if you can, distill it to between 3 and 5 key topics and stay to those topics and wander into the forest on crazy tangents if they get excited and
Mm-hmm.
want to go on that journey through the woods with you.
Yeah.
Odds are they will,
Mm-hmm.
if you answer their question.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great point of communication to think. Well, A, to simplify, yeah, that 100% is so true. But to gauge people's reaction, again, to use that psychology or just that personal understanding of someone to understand what level of detail is this person feeling right now. And sometimes just asking can help too. Asking someone like, what level of detail would you like? Do you want me to include all the details? Are you someone who likes to pour over all that, or are you someone who just wants you want the headline, you want the just the base information, and if there's anything additional, you'll reach out, sort of thing. There's a lot of power in just asking people how they want to be communicated with.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, we have another question here. It says, also, you spoke about a symphony, or on the flip side, a cacophony, but what elements such as governance, integration, or adaptability do you think play the role of the conductor in orchestrating a seamless and impactful data ecosystem?
Mm, all these great questions. Yes, governance is absolutely important. And so when you have this cacophony of ideas and initiatives, like me as an empowerment or data conductor, orchestrator, I need to know who is responsible for each of the other portions of the orchestra. Like, I'm going to have a violin lead, I'm going to have a winds lead, I'm going to have a percussion lead. And so we, individual humans, cannot and should not do everything. And so when you're thinking about empowering people and empowering data, talk to your folks and find out who is the most passionate about helping to ensure rhythm. That's your governance. Like you've got these things that you need to do, and there are people, again, fixed mindset versus a change mindset. Like everybody has something that they want to bring to the table, something that charges them. And so if you find this person who is just like truly passionate on the governance of things, and you enable them to lead the rhythm section, they will do an amazing job and they will do that for you. And so you can just trust them to say, you know government, you know governance, you know the rhythm, do it according to the rules that are laid out. And you give that to someone who is of this fixed mindset, and it will be perfect. It will be incredible if you give them the time to do it. But you have to talk to them. You have to find out what they want. Does it match their personality, their goals, their outcomes? And just go from there. Data governance is huge, especially as we're moving from one system to another. We need to make sure that our data are clean. We need to make sure that our data are following all the appropriate rules. This thing called AI and ChatGPT and all this other stuff is out there. But like even those things, they need to be governed appropriately. And so you need to make sure that you have all of these guardrails in place to ensure that it is all being used appropriately. And there are people who want to do that. Find them and bring them into your team.
Michael, you already spoke like before about moving to cloud or embracing AI or everything about change. Do you have some tips, things to consider when we have to go through a change or lead a change?
Yes. So I earlier mentioned that nearly every human has a universal desire of time, more time and less time. Well, there is another universal constant that you may have heard before. I don't know who originally said it. I'm going to butcher it. Garrett, I'll be in your camp too.
Thank you.
The only constant is change,
Yes.
right? So we right now, it's kind of fascinating. It's not very often that we are able to realize that we are in a fundamental shift in the way that things are done. So one of my favorite authors, his name is James Burke, wrote a whole bunch of stuff and has a fantastic 1979 documentary called Connections, but he has this alternative view of change. And so he goes through the history of practically everything up to 1979, but what what he does a really good job of conveying is that these change events are happening all the time. And so the Black Plague in the medieval ages, it did a lot to the human population at the time, but because of that, there was a technological shift that more things became mechanized, even in the medieval ages. And so, like, we are now in this instance of change where things are going from these more on-premise or slow, antiquated systems over into the cloud. This is a change moment. And so, for those of us who are able to see that it is change, it's important. And then to the question about governance, recognize that change is happening, then get in the forefront of it. Nice. Let's tie it back to this tool question poll that we had at the very beginning. In these change environments, it means that there are going to be new tools. So you recognize that there's going to be a change, and then you say to yourself, okay, what tool is going to help us bridge this change? Then the other cool thing is if you become this change leader, recognize that a change is coming, then you are able to guide or advise what should come along and what should stay behind. So if you know that you are going to be taking a trip to the moon and I'm going to be going with you, I probably shouldn't bring my piano,
No, you
right?
should. You
Well,
should be music.
like that's going to be something that we will need to leave behind. To not like we have built systems, we have built fantastic things, but sometimes as you are migrating to an environment, you have to be okay with letting some things go.
Hmm. Yeah. That's really important.
Almost,
Oh, go ahead, Annabelle. Go ahead.
no, I wanted to say almost philosophical.
Right? No, like Interstellar, one of my favorite movies. Hopefully, no spoilers to anybody, but towards the end, one of the key characters says, well, the only way to get to where you're going is to leave something behind.
Mm. Hmm.
Or somebody.
No spoilers.
But
I
that can
don't
be a lot.
remember.
Yeah, that can be a lot. It's tough to leave the things that are known behind because they feel safe, they feel comfortable, even if they're not idea. Yes, Teddy is just asking. We saw a hand raise. So yeah, by all means, please ask the question in the chat. We'd love to answer it. Um, but yeah, that's a very important thing. I also something that resonates with what you said as well, Michael, is sometimes it is as easy as having someone whose job it is to look on the horizon. I think a lot of times we people get blindsided because well, we're not making the bandwidth or the space to be looking for those things. And so obviously there's something to be said for people who can go and execute and operate and govern these things, but a lot of times we just devalue the impact of just having someone who's part of their job is to look and evaluate and bring that back to the group rather than it's just very easy to get tunnel vision and you're on the thing, you spent money on the thing and you're using it and you're you think you're beyond that evaluation phase, but it's always important, especially now, like you said, in this moment, to be on the lookout for things that are changing, but also to balance that with other people who can cut through the hype because there's plenty of hype, there's plenty of marketing, so it's all a balancing act.
Absolutely. I didn't hear a question in there, but I agree with you.
No question, commentary, commentary.
Was Linda able to ask their question in the chat?
I have not seen it yet. We have about a minute left, so we'll see if it gets popped in there. In the meantime, I'm gonna put up these slides just so people can see if they want to connect with us. I'm interested. Michael, we had talked briefly, kind of at the beginning. Aside from all the work-related things and philosophical things, I mean, what else do you really enjoy? What else gives you life beyond your professional pursuits? I know you had said making things for people. Is there any more on that you can
Yeah,
inform us on?
yeah, absolutely. So when I was in college, I've got a good buddy. I'll tell him this anecdote after we're done here, but he has a game that he plays. I don't play it at all, but he was like, I need help keeping track of all of these things that I have painted for his own game.
Mm,
And so like he, knowing that I dabble in data stuff, I just made a cloud-based solution where he could easily keep track of all these little things that he's painting. And he's so happy that he's able to do that. And that fulfills me. And so just always being able to make things, uh, one of the other things that refills my cup is with my two kids, baking with them, like
mhm.
just bringing them along for the ride and say, hey, today we're going to make muffins or bread or waffles or whatever, and just bring them along. It's so much fun. So making is so important in my life, just
Mhm.
making all kinds of things.
Mhm. I like that. I like the things that fill my cup and fill my belly. So baking is a great one.
Yeah. Yeah. Lastly, so our neighbor over here, they are going to be putting in a new deck. And so they
Mhm.
had to rip out what they had before. And so there's just this pile of scrap wood. And I'm like, well, can I have it? He's like, okay. And so I built some tables from the scrap wood. I haven't built tables before, but it was so much fun.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that. Yeah, I remember I built a table, 10 years ago. It's been a long time, but building, creating, it very is such a human thing, whatever it may be, whether it's music, whether it's something tangible, whether it's something edible, whether it's, any of those things. So I love that through line of creation not only permeates your professional life, but your personal life. And I think all those things, they feed each other, right? It's all this kind of virtuous cycle that all comes together. So we are at 11:01. I will start by saying thank you so much, Michael, for joining us, for being on here. This is Data Enablement Philosophy Hour. I really enjoyed it.
Of course, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's great meeting both of you, Garrett, Annabelle. This is so much fun.
Awesome.
Thank you for me.
Yes, and just a reminder to people who are tuning in for this recording, this will be emailed out within a few days. And I saw someone who had mentioned the LinkedIn profiles. We'll be sure to include those links in the email once the webinar is live. But Annabelle, Michael, thanks again for joining us, and I will wish you a good day.
And you, be well.
See you next month. Bye.
Bye.